Hi, guys. I'm going to read chapter 15 of 39 Clues, The Maze of Bones, for you to watch tonight. That means we'll only have about 50 pages to read tomorrow, and if we work really hard, we should be able to get through the book and have it finished before the break, which would be fun, because then we won't have to spend the whole break wondering about what's happening to Dan and Amy Cahill. Here we go, chapter 15. Dan thought Nellie was going to kill them. He had never seen her face that shade of red before. You did what? She paced their tiny hotel room. 2 hours, you said. 2 hours. And I was standing outside the hotel for like ever. And you didn't come. You didn't call. I thought you were dead. She shook her iPod for emphasis, and the loose earbuds danced around. Our phone didn't work, Amy said sheepishly. We got sidetracked, Dan added. There was this concussive grenade, and a cement truck, and a battery, and a loaf of bread. Dan was pretty sure that covered all of the important details, but Nellie looked like she didn't understand anything. Start from the beginning, she said, and no lies. Dan told her the whole story, even about the 39 clues, with and Amy filled in all of the things that he forgot. So you almost died, Amy said. So you almost died, Nellie said. Those jerks were going to pour cement on you? Maybe a little cement, Dan said. What did the inscription say? Nellie asked. Dan did not know French. The inscription he's talking about, you guys, is the plaque that was on the floor that said Dan and Amy Cahill and a bunch of French words. She's asking Dan, what were the French words? Dan didn't know any French, but he had automatically memorized the words on the marble slab, so he knew the letters, and he could tell Nellie the letters. He repeated the letters to Nellie. Here lie Dan and Amy Cahill, she translated, who stuck their noses in the wrong people's business. It was Irina Spassky's fault, Dan said. She tricked us into going there. The whole thing was a setup. And we can't even pay you, Amy added miserably. We don't have enough money for the flight home. I'm really sorry, Nellie. Nellie stood very still. Her glitter eyeshadow was red today, which made her eyes look even angrier. Her arms were crossed over her T-shirt, which showed some picture of a screaming punk rocker. All in all, she looked pretty darn scary. Then she grabbed Amy and Dan and she hugged them fiercely. She's really glad they were safe. She knelt down so she was looking at them in the eyes. I've got some credit left on my MasterCard. We'll be fine. Dan was confused. You're not going to kill us? I'm going to help you, silly, Nellie said. She shook her shoulders gently. Nobody messes with my babysittees. Perry's, Dan corrected. Remember, Dan doesn't like to think of her as a babysitter. He's too big for that. Whatever, now get some sleep. Tomorrow we're going to slap some people senseless. Maison de Gardons did not mean the House of Gardens. Apparently Gardons meant roaches. Dan found this out because Nellie told him, and because he heard scuttling sounds along the floor all night long. He wished Saladin were there. The cat would have had a great time playing jungle stalker. In the morning, everybody looked bleary-eyed, but they showered and changed clothes. Nellie came back from the corner cafe with coffee for herself, hot chocolate for Dan and Amy, and pain au chocolat for all of them. Dan figured any country that ate chocolate for breakfast couldn't be all bad. So Dan said, can I get some more grenades today? No, Amy said. Dan, you're lucky it was only concussive. You could have wiped out the whole Holt family. And that would have been bad because... Okay, knock it off, Nellie said. The important thing is you guys are safe. Amy picked at her croissant. She looked pale this morning. Her hair was a tangled mess. Dan, I'm sorry about last night. I panicked. I almost got us killed. Dan had pretty much forgotten about that part. He'd been annoyed with her at the time, but it was hard to stay mad at Amy when she looked miserable and apologized. Plus, she'd done that cool thing with the battery, which had kind of made up for her freaking out. Don't worry about it, he said. But if it happens again... Hey, if we let Irina lure us into a trap again, we are stupider than the Holts. Amy did not look very comforted. What I don't understand is the man in black. Why was he there last night? And if the Holts started the fire at the mansion and set up the museum explosion, that was what the man in black was doing. Then what was the man in black doing in both of those places? Dan finished. And why did Irina have a photo of him? He waited for Amy to come up with one of her, oh, I read a book about that looks. But she just kept frowning at her breakfast. He waited for Amy to, maybe you guys should concentrate on where we are going next, Nellie advised. Amy took a deep breath. I think I know where to go. Dan, can I use your laptop? He stared at her because Amy didn't like computers. But finally he brought it over and Amy started searching the internet. In no time, she grimaced and turned the screen for them to see. The picture showed a pile of bones in a dark stone room. I've suspected for a while, Amy said, but I was hoping I was wrong because it's risky. The maze of bones, that's what Mom's note said in Poor Richard's almanac. We have to explore the catacombs. Is that where they keep the cats? Dan asked. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable question to him, but Amy gave him a, you're such a dummy look. The catacombs are an underground cemetery. An underground maze, like a cemetery, she said. I told you, Paris is riddled, that means full of, Paris is riddled with caves and tunnels, right? All the limestone they used to build the city ever since the Roman days, they dug from underground. And it left a whole network of empty spaces. Some are just pits like the one we fell into last night. And some are networks of tunnels, Nellie said. Yeah, I remember hearing about this, and they are filled with bones, right? I want a room decorated with bones, Dan said. Where'd they come from? Cemeteries, Amy said. Back in the 1700s, the cemeteries were getting overcrowded, so they decided to dig up tons of old bodies, all their bones, and move them into the catacombs. The thing is, look at the clothes. Or the thing is, look at the dates. See when they started moving bones into the catacombs? Dan squinted at the screen. He didn't see what she was talking about. Is it my birthday? No, doofus. Look, 1785. They didn't officially declare it open until the next year. But they started planning the project and moving the bones in 1785, which was also the last year that Benjamin Franklin was in Paris. Whoa, you mean he hid something down there? It got so quiet that Dan could hear roaches scuttling in the closet. So, Nellie said, we have to go underground into a maze filled with bones and find whatever it is? Amy nodded. Except the catacombs are huge, and we don't know where to look. The only thing I can think, there's one public entrance. Public means everybody can use it. It says here it's across from the Denfert-Rochereau metro station in the 14th arrondissement. But if that's the only public entrance, Dan said, then the other teams might head there too. Everybody's been stealing that almanac from each other. They'll figure out the maze of bones thing eventually if they haven't already. Good enough for me. Nellie brushed the chocolate and the breadcrumbs off her skirt. Let's go meet your family.